most of us are living our small lives, and we have the potential to be so much more than we can even imagine, and that you do have the ability to recreate your thinking to give you the life you want to live.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
Meet Bob Martin, a certified meditation teacher with an MSW to go with his JD. He has helped hundreds redesign their thinking for the life they dream of. Now a two-time published author and professor of wellness at Elon University, Bob blends Taoist wisdom, brain science, psychology, and humor to tackle everything from breaking free of limiting beliefs to finding clarity and resilience in life's chaos.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hi, Bob. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You have a terrific resume. You've done many things. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about what you're all about, what your brand might be?
Yeah. So I know I'm 75 years old. I'm in my second marriage in a blended family. I've got 2 kids and 2 grandkids, and my wife has 4 kids and 9 grandkids, and we are in a very loving and happy relationship, and I'm not necessarily sure that our upbringings would have predicted that. So we're quite blessed.
My first question is always the same. If you like, could you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Well,
I think the important things about my childhood is that we're talking about the 1950s, and back in the 1950s, if you were a big child, you were called a husky. And they didn't make a lot of great clothes for bigger kids then. As a matter of fact, you had to go to J.C. Penney's, go to the husky department. But I tell you this because my clothes didn't fit real well, and I had to keep adjusting them. And back in elementary school, all the girls thought that I had bugs or something, and they called me cooties, and they ran away from me whenever I came near. And this went on for years and years. And, it's not like, some traumas involve beatings and terrible, terrible things, but, each of us has our own pain. And that, for me, was quite painful. Not only that, but my parents were Eastern European immigrants, and the very, staid and not particularly emotional, and they didn't have any real capacity for kind of understanding the bullying that I was going through. And so all of that kind of led to, some problems around self-esteem. So, also, I guess I grew up in an amusement park, and so always kind of felt like I was an outsider. Even today, I suppose I suffer from imposter syndrome. I keep thinking that if people really knew who I was, they wouldn't think so highly of me.
Okay, so it sounds like it was a little bit rough growing up. You had an addiction to opium, you said?
I did.
Now, when did that start? Was that in teenage years, 20s, 30s?
That actually happened in my late 30s and 40s. I was out weeding. I was out weeding in the garden and bending over again and again and again. And it turns out I tore my hamstrings. And so I went to the doctor, and he gave me a pill, a Percocet. And I took that pill for the pain in my legs, and all of a sudden, all the pain in my life went away. It's not just the pain in my legs, all of the pain in my life, it just went away. And from that moment on, all I wanted to do was to experience that again. And, not right away, but gradually, whenever I had an opportunity, to get some, I'd get some. And then I remember one day I was waiting for my supplier to come and meet me and give me my next supply, sitting on my bed, and I start going into DTs and getting sick and puking and stuff. And I sat there and I shook my head and I said, "Well, Bob, I guess you're an addict."
So after that, you found ways to break yourself out of your addiction?
Well, I hobbled along with it, kind of like being a functional addict. But in 2001, I married my second wife, and she would have none of it. She would have none of it. And it was either the pills or her. And so I just made a decision that I loved her more than I loved the pills, and I was going to do anything that I needed to do to get myself clean. And so I started going to NA meetings and rehab and whatever I needed to do. But what really, really grabbed a hold of me was my training under a Taoist master. So I didn't really grow up in a spiritual home. My folks, being Eastern Europe immigrants, all of their ancestors were wiped out either by the Bolsheviks or the Nazis, and they kind of came to the conclusion there couldn't be a God. So I didn't really have any religion background until I met Master Wachi Ni from the Shaolin Temple, and I studied under him for 8 years, and that was part of my recovery.
So how were you able to meet a person like that? Did he live here in this country?
But it was by total accident. I was seeing a therapist, and the therapist wound up being the English language editor and disciple of Master Ni. And at some point, I didn't know that when I first started going to him, but at some point, he suggested some Taoist practices for me, some energy work like Tai Chi and Kung Fu. And I started getting curious about Taoism, and that's when he revealed to me his connection with the Shaolin Temple.
Okay, so this was to help you get over your addiction, or this happened years later that you met him?
It helped me maintain my recovery.
Okay. And is that when you started getting into meditation?
I got into meditation. Taoism is much more contemplative and much more energy work. There's a lot of movement in it, and there's also a lot of reading and contemplating. It's not really all that meditative, but when I moved to North Carolina, there's not a lot of Taoists here, so I started going to Buddhist temples, and Buddhism is very, very much around meditation, so that's when I started meditating.
Meditation, that's a subject that's pretty popular, and a lot of people want to do it. I've tried several times, and, I start pretty good, and then after a while, I'm just thinking about everything but my breath. So,
yeah.
Is there an easy method of meditating?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that the question needs to be considered. The question assumes that the idea is to try to quiet your mind or to be able to maintain your focus on something, and it's not. That's just a huge misconception. A lot of people think that meditation is very passive. It's just sitting quietly and emptying the mind and being calm, and you might as well have some crystals around and incense and hug a tree and all that stuff. And it's really nothing like that. It's much more of an active process. So yeah, I don't have any doubt that you had what you think you kind of call a failure to meditate, but you were probably actually meditating. You just didn't know it. You thought you were failing, but you were probably meditating. And So if I can go into a little bit of like what meditation is. So meditation, in the scientists have a word. It's called metacognition. It's thinking about your thinking, and there's nothing that's really unusual about that. We all kind of do it. We just don't do it intentionally, and we don't do it in a way that has some structure and consistency. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever been listening to somebody and you were really interested in what they were saying and you really intended to listen to them, but then all of a sudden your mind started wandering and you were thinking about, what you left on the stove or what you should have said to that son of a gun yesterday or what you're going to do tomorrow, right? Does this happen?
My mind just wanders all the time.
Right,
it's all over the place.
Right. And so, but if you really intended to listen, at some point, you kind of have this little sensation, this little startled feeling that, you go, oh, I'm not listening. Am I right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, many times.
In meditation, that little feeling of startle, that little feeling of like, oh, I'm not doing what I intended to do, that's what we call waking up. So that is the moment of mindfulness. And so you can't really be mindful unless your mind wanders. So it has to wander in order for you to meditate. So there's nothing wrong with it wandering. So what happens is when you do have that little startled feeling, oh, I'm not listening. So then the next thing that hits you is like a whole series of judgments, right? Oh, I should have been listening and I didn't hear what he said. And how am I going to get him to repeat it? And what if he finds out that I wasn't listening and I didn't mean to insult? And all this craziness goes on with judgments in your mind. But eventually you let all that go and you go back to listening to the guy. That's generally how it works for folks, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that is the process of meditation, except we set it up kind of artificially, where I say, instead of intending to listen to the guy, I'm going to intend to pay attention to this candle. I'm going to intend to pay attention to my breath. And then your mind goes crazy. It starts thinking about the past and the future and everything. But at some point, you get that little startled feeling, oh, I'm not paying attention to the candle. And then all the judgments go off, and then you return back and you give your attention back to the candle. Then your mind goes off again, and you wake up and you return and you begin again. And then your mind goes off again, and you wake up and you return and you begin again. So there's nothing about that is unusual for anybody. Now, you might say, well, what does this do for you? I mean, that sounds like, a silly exercise. What does that do for you? So here's what it does for you. When your mind wanders, and then, first of all, when you set the intention to pay attention to your breath, it's like going into your brain and setting a little alarm clock and asking your mind to remind you when your mind wanders. So you do that. Then your mind wanders, then you wake up, and you have that little sensation of all of a sudden coming to attention, of waking up. And then the judgments come. So look at all that you start to observe in a structured way. You notice what it feels like to be in a fog of thinking about the past and thinking about the future. You start to see what that feels like. You start to see what it feels like to wake up. You start to notice all of the judgments because, at this point, you're doing it for the purpose of noticing all this stuff. So what happens is you begin to be able to distinguish between being in the fog of the default, blah, 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 and what it feels like to wake up, and what it feels like to give your attention, and what it feels like to be judgmental. And so you're beginning to notice all of this. And if you practice this, and you begin again and begin again and begin again, inside of 10 minutes, you might begin 12, 15 times. But each time you're getting a little bit more familiar with how your brain works. And so over a couple of weeks, maybe a week of doing this, 10 minutes a day, all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I'm not my thoughts. I'm beginning to watch my thoughts. And I am not my thoughts, because, we all say, hey, I had a thought. Well, who is the I that had the thought? And what meditation helps you to do is to break out of being the thought and reconnect with the creator of the thought. And most of us who are suffering from anxiety and depression, it's all because of the thoughts that come up automatically. Oh, I'm not good enough, or something bad's going to happen, or, I'm going to lose the house, or my check's going to bounce. So you're having all these thoughts, and the thoughts are what is controlling you. And meditation is about befriending the thoughts and allowing the thoughts and recognizing the thoughts and being aware of the thoughts, and eventually understanding that they're just thoughts. What is a thought anyway? It's something that, comes from somewhere, and it exists for a little while, and then it goes away. You can't trade it. You can't sell it. You can't hold it in your hand. And eventually you come to this conclusion, you almost want to hit yourself in the head like, wow, I could have had a V8. Go, wow, here are these crazy little impulses of electricity that are running through my brain, and they've been controlling my life? How nuts is that? But you have to go through the process of being able to get to that point.
Yeah, I think with me, I feel that I'm watching myself all the time, in a sense. I think I go through that. I guess that's mindfulness.
Well, it depends. If you're watching yourself with judgment, then it's just the fog.
Okay. Well, not always, but sometimes, like, I'll do something, I'll say something, and the person that's watching will say, why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why did you act that way? And it always feels to me that there is another entity that I am the watcher of myself.
Yes.
That's the way it feels to me.
Yes, absolutely. That's where we want to go, to that watcher, and learn how to be with that watcher. Not to quiet the thoughts, but just to watch them roll through. We want to be, because I use this metaphor. We all feel like we have a river of consciousness that flows through our mind, and there's all these sticks and twigs, which are the individual thoughts. And like we're riding on the twig that's floating down the river. And if the river's calm, life is good. And if the river's white water, then it's choppy. But we're controlled by the river and the stick. But when you say, just like you just said, I think like I'm the watcher, it's like there's a different part of you. It's almost like a separate being that climbs up on the bank of the river and is actually watching you on the twig on the river, right?
Right. I mean, that's the way I feel a lot of times.
Yeah. That's meditating. That's what meditating is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's just a situation where I get a thought, but not just a thought. I get an emotion that goes along with the thought. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, I'll say, I can't do this podcast today. And I'll get a thought of dread, an emotion of dread. And at that point, I know I'm not in my watcher. I know that I'm reacting to something I said in my head over and over again, like a broken record, that I'm not good enough. I can't do it. You should just kill yourself. All these, I call them demons. They come out and they pound me on certain days. Some days I can control them, and other days they control me like a bear. Sometimes you eat the bears and the bear eats you. So, but my problem, I guess, is I can't control that flow of emotions that come over me.
Well, no, you can't, and so you can't control it, and so you can't make it not happen. But what you can do is you can allow it to happen. I know that's counterintuitive, but the funny thing is that what you resist persists, but what you can be with will let you be. And it's almost as if your mind, there's a little impish brat in your head that wants to bother you and annoy you. And the more energy you give it by trying to resist it, the more energy it has. But if you can just allow it to be, eventually it kind of gets bored. It says, oh, I can't bother this guy anymore. And it just kind of goes away.
Mine is like, a ball of snow going down the mountain. I just keep getting worse feelings. If I just let it be, okay, it'll just get worse and worse to the point where I'm almost not functional. It gets to a bad point. I don't seem to be able to just let it come through and then not spiral down. That spiraling is where I have an issue. I don't know what causes that, but I'll get a thought like, oh, I can't do this podcast. And then it's like, oh, it's going to screw up. Oh, it's this and that. And it's just uncontrollable, and I feel terrible. A lot of times I'm doing a podcast, and I'm doing it okay, but I feel terrible. I feel all these emotions that I think are inappropriate. Is there a way that meditation could help me in that area?
Yeah, there is. What you're describing, though, is the product of a lot of conditioning and a lot of thinking. And if you kind of understand the electrical activity and how it works inside the brain, every time you have one of those thoughts, you have neurons that are firing together, and they're wiring together, and they're forming a neural pathway. And the thicker that neural pathway is, the easier it is to think those thoughts. And so thinking different thoughts or new thoughts, it almost feels like it's hard to think it, especially if you don't understand it, or maybe I'm not good at math. So your neural pathways are very thin, and it feels like, oh, I'm just not good at that. I don't like to think about that. It feels like it's even difficult to. But these thoughts have been recurring so often that the neural pathways are so thick, it's like sending electricity through a big cable. There's no resistance.
Right.
There's no, and so the only thing that you can really do, if as a meditation, not as a therapist, I can't talk as a therapist, but as a meditation teacher, what I would say is most of all that activity is centered in the right prefrontal cortex, the right front of your brain. And the only way that meditation and even brain science says that you can begin to not control that, but mitigate it, is by building up the electrical activity on the left side of the brain. So as a meditation teacher, I would say, what we need to do is we need to have more joy in our life. We need to go out and intentionally seek out moments of awe. We have to go look at sunsets. We have to look at beautiful pictures. We have to do things that we enjoy doing, because as we do that, we're building up the neural pathways in the left side of the brain, and we want to get to a place where we're balanced.
I was told that, I'm sorry, if you change the thought, in other words, you have a bad thought, and you just shut it off and think of something else. Do you agree with that, or?
If it works for you, but the chances are that you'll change it for a short period of time and then it's going to come back. Mm-hmm. More than likely. What we say in meditation is that there are 3 poisonous roots. And those 3 poisonous roots are wanting things, especially things that you don't have, wanting or greed. I want more. I want that car. I want a pretty girl. I want this. I want that. There's not wanting or pushing away or hating or disliking. So there's liking and disliking, and then there's ignorance. And these three things cause us most of our discomfort. So what we try to teach in meditation are the antidotes to those things. And so the antidote to greed is generosity. And so, as a meditator, I always carry a bunch of $1 bills in my pocket. And whenever I pass one of those guys ringing the bell, I always put a dollar bill in there. Always. I always practice generosity. I give stuff away, stuff that I like, stuff that is important to me. I give it away and give it to a new home. So I practice generosity. And that makes me not care about my wanting so much. As far as hating and aversion and pushing away, I try to practice compassion and empathy. But I intentionally practice cultivating that. And I practice also understanding the connection between my heart and my heart intelligence and my brain intelligence, and that's wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so the three antidotes are generosity, compassion, and wisdom. And so we have to, in my mind, I think that with the chaos of the world and all the politics and the divisive nature that, our country has fallen into and the like, if you do not intentionally seek out the things that give you joy, you'll go down a rabbit hole of depression.
Right.
You have to, we have a responsibility to joy.
Okay.
We have a responsibility to be joyful.
Yeah. Because when I'll try to change the thought, but the other thing that I do is I go on my computer because I love computers. So if I'm watching a TV show and I feel a feeling, I'll take out my computer and have that take over, and it helps a lot. It gets my mind set in a different direction. Does that sound like something that is good? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're enjoying it, if it's something that enjoys and gives you joy, then do it.
Right.
And reflect on how happy it makes you feel. Mm-hmm. Just feel it. Allow yourself to experience that joy. And going back to something else you said about the emotions.
Right.
One of the things that we learn in meditation is that emotions can be deconstructed into their component parts. Because what an emotion actually is nothing more than a particular thought and a particular body sensation. Mm-hmm. Like if I were to say, to someone, I love you, but that comment was just, I didn't have any physical sensation. There was no swelling in my chest. There was no feeling of reaching out, of my energy field growing. I didn't have those physical sensations. It would just be an intellectual comment. On the other hand, if I had that sensation of my chest expanding, but I didn't have the thought of I love you, I probably would think I had indigestion, right? So if we realize that our emotions, which, are always so powerful, you can ask yourself, what is the body sensation I'm feeling now? Where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my neck? Is it a glow? Do I feel a pounding? What is the body sensation? And then we identify that. And what is the thought? By the time you go through that process of asking those few questions, the emotion tends to be deconstructed and not be in control of you anymore.
Yeah, that sounds good, because when I get the thought, it always seems to be taking me to a place where my chest feels like there's like poison running through it. it's that feeling of shock. My heart drops, they say. That's what happens. My heart just drops. And if I allow that to continue, it'll take me to that place. So that's why I try to replace the thought. I try to do something else. I even touch things. That helps me. If I just touch things, that brings me into like the now time period, and it helps. So those are things I try to use, and I don't know if I'm doing it right or not, but
yeah. Sometimes there's a practice called the 5 sense awareness, which when you're feeling a bit anxious, you could say, what am I seeing right now? And then you start describing to yourself, what am I seeing? What am I hearing right now? What am I smelling right now? What am I touching right now? And you go through your 5 senses and spend a little time just, trying to describe what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a buzz from a motor. I'm hearing a little bird chirp outside, or the wind blowing through this, and if by the time you go through all 5 senses, it tends to reduce the sensation of anxiety.
right. Yeah, well, that's what I do with my touching things. It's very similar, but I could incorporate other things to go along with that. So, if someone wants to get started with meditation, what do you? I mean, is it 10 minutes a day? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, there are books and there are apps out there, but to tell you the truth, just like you experienced when you tried to do it on your own, you can have some misconceptions about what it is, and there's nothing like a coach. There's nothing like somebody who can, give you the motivation, hold you accountable, and but for some people that's not attainable. So like I say, there are some really good apps out there. I think Insight Timer is the best app out there. There's another app called Balance, which has an artificial intelligence coach built into it that gives you daily suggestions. There are some books by Jon Kabat-Zinn, A Beginner's Guide to Meditation. These are all good. I am asked often these same questions. How do I get started? And, so I wrote a 40-page ebook that is freely downloadable, and it answers all those questions, and it has a whole bunch of resources in it. So if anybody wants to, further explore whether meditation's right for you, they can just go to my website and download that ebook. There's no obligation and there's no cost.
What is your website name?
It's awiseandhappylife.com.
Okay, I'll put that in the description of the program. So you're saying that you do this type of coaching, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm certified in 2 different schools, and I teach meditation for credit on the college campus. We have a wellness program on the college campus, and I teach on the college campus, and I have a private practice, and I teach corporate executives. I teach kids coming out of foster care and kids in the juvenile justice system. I teach single moms. I teach college students. I absolutely love teaching meditation. If I can tell you the reason why is because the way that I teach is somewhat unique in that I ask my students to practice 10 minutes a day, and the course only runs, it's just 4 weeks. And I ask them to practice 10 minutes a day and then jot down a little bit of a response, a reflection on what that 10 minutes was like. And every single day, that reflection comes to my dashboard. And every single morning, I get up in the morning and I get to read those reflections and respond to them and give feedback every single day. And so inside of 4 weeks, it's like meeting with your coach 28 times. and the progress that my students make is extraordinary. And what I just love and I get my life from is that I get to watch their minds first kind of struggle against the conditioning and kind of like finding it difficult to just keeping it simple. And then like a week, they start to loosen up. And then by the end of 2 weeks, all of a sudden they just break free and they got this new freedom in their lives. And it's just so rewarding for me. I just love it.
They could go to your website to sign up for a course or for your teacher. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can read about me, and there's a meditation 101 section, which tells you more about meditation. It has some videos. I've got a resource page where you can go, and I've got 56 gigabytes of videos and documents and resources. So it's a helpful website.
Yeah, it sounds great. There's so much more about your life that we didn't get a chance to get into. You're a criminal lawyer and other things on your resume that are very impressive. But I think we were trying to stick to something that stays in the mental health area.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe we could get you on another time.
That would be great.
To cover everything else.
That would be great.
But the one last thing I looked at, it said the work ethic of happiness.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. What is that all about?
Yeah, the good news about happiness is that it can be learned. It can be learned. But it's, sometimes I'll be talking to somebody about mindfulness and somebody else will overhear it and go, oh, meditation, that's what I need. And I say to them, well, would you be willing to practice 10 minutes a day? Oh, I don't know if I've got 10 minutes a day. Would you be willing to wake up 10 minutes earlier? Oh, no, I'm not going to wake up 10 minutes earlier. So, if you want to be happy, if you want to be able to redesign your thinking so that you actually have a say in creating the life that you're dreaming of, if you want that, there's no way of getting around the fact that you got to put in the time.
Well, you got to do the work.
You got to do the work. I mean, you just got to. I mean, you can't say I want to run a marathon and then show up on the first day of the marathon and think you're going to run 28 miles. Yeah, it ain't going to happen. So if you want it, I mean, think about this. Here's something that doesn't cost. You don't have to buy any equipment. It doesn't cost you anything on an ongoing basis. You can do it in your home. It doesn't take a lot of physical effort. It only needs 10 minutes a day, and it can change your life in a way that you just is extraordinary. Why wouldn't you do that?
You have to learn to love yourself.
You have to learn to love yourself, yes.
Yeah, and then you will probably help yourself.
Yeah.
There's so many people that they have a mental illness and they don't take care of themselves.
Don't. Mm-hmm.
They let their health go. They let everything go.
Yeah. In the Bible, it says that Jesus says that there are two commandments, and one is to love your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. But if your mind is all full of judgments and the committee in your head and ruminations and stuff, how could you love your God with all your heart and soul and mind? You have to have a clear mind. And the other thing that he said was you need to love your neighbor as yourself. But what if you don't love yourself? How can you love your neighbor? So, everything that he laid out about the path to a happy life requires first taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's just great advice. Usually at the end of the show, I let the guests talk to the audience. Do you want to do that? Or
yeah,
you want to have a final statement you'd like to make?
I would just say that most of us are living our small lives, and we have the potential to be so much more than we can even imagine. And it all starts with understanding that you are the creator of your life and that you do have the ability to recreate your thinking, to give you the life you want to live. It's possible. You can do it, and it doesn't take an awful lot of effort, but it does take some consistency and some practice. But you can do it. And I promise you, if you can just trust the process, I've had so many students whose lives have changed that to me, there's not even a debate about whether it's possible.
Wow, that's terrific news. It was so good having you as a guest. Like I said, there's so much more we could have talked about, but I think we did the right subject.
Absolutely.
Okay, Bob, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have a great day, and take care.